Good afternoon. This is John Padilla with IPD Latin America, and I'm pleased to be hosting the fifth Curtain Raiser interview as we count down here to the Madrid Energy Conference that we are hosting with our partners in the Institute of the Americas and Global Energy Partners next week. It's taking place September 28th through October 2nd. We have over 60 speakers on the agenda. It's quite a bit. We have 5 energy ministers. We have over 30 senior executives, 10 other senior government officials. And it's going to be just something that is a little bit for everybody. Today, I'm pleased to be able to speak with Catherine von Burg, the CEO and co-founder of SimpliPhi Power, based out of California. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you here. SimpliPhi is sponsoring our event, and Catherine will be a panelist on our Hub and Spoke versus Smart Grid panel, something that I think is quite relevant, particularly with what's going on out in California and globally. So in addition to Catherine, we're going to have another CEO from a power company, a renewables energy company, as well as a utility, and then a utility executive, as well as the head of Brazilian government electricity research entity. So it's going to be quite the panel, and really looking forward to it. Again, something that you're not going to want to miss. So want to jump right into our conversation here, Catherine. And I think that SimpliPhi, it'd be really interesting to understand a little bit about the history of the company, battery manufacturer, but really one that is not necessarily as big of a household name, but has had a really interesting history, and one that has been really much at the forefront on the lithium side. So if you could give us a little bit of background on that and your story, it'd be fantastic.
Sure. Thank you so much for this introduction and opportunity to be here. Looking forward to the panel. So SimpliPhi Power, founded in 2010. And at that time, we looked at energy storage as being critical in solving a number of problems around access to energy. And first and foremost, it was security, creating resilience. And that meant for people both on-grid and off-grid. And for us, fundamentally, we believe that if we're talking about energy security, we could not use a chemistry that would put the end user at risk. And in the early days of lithium-ion batteries, it was thought that the thermal profile and the risk of thermal runaway, fires, explosions, that the size alone would mitigate risk, meaning these batteries were initially developed for small consumer electronics, laptops, cell phones. But as we've progressed, and here we are 10 years later, these batteries have been scaled up in size. And as you scale up in capacity and size, the battery, you scale up that risk. And we saw that play out in Surprise, Arizona this past year with APS, the Fluence battery, LG Chem cells, and some of the catastrophic impact that can be caused by cobalt, which is really the property that creates these thermal incidents. And so as a company, we decided energy security, we cannot use that. And we needed to innovate around a newer lithium ion chemistry, the lithium iron phosphate. And that eliminated cobalt, and that allowed us to really think about security. The other issues we were looking to solve was, at the time, 1.2 billion people living beyond the grid. I believe the numbers now hover around 900 million, not over a billion, but still a lot of people. So we've been a focused company, really with a mission behind what we do to bring power to some of the most remote, harsh territories around the world, began to work with the Department of Defense as well, really proving out the technology. At the time, the Department of Defense had banned all lithium ion chemistry and batteries, again, because of that thermal runaway with the cobalt. So early on, we were really able to validate our technology and the safety and began deploying systems overseas. And that became a proposition that involved microgrids and again, installations that really changed people's lives, because when they have access to power, then they have access for lighting, refrigeration, for medicine, clinics, schools. And we began to really work with organizations that were focused on these parts of the world. We're also very much a grid-tied solution as well, and looking at solving intermittency around renewables at the time. Now when we look at the grid, intermittency isn't just relegated to renewables, it's relegated to the grid. And we're seeing failures, certainly in California, where our headquarters are and where we manufacture, but all over the country and all over the world. The grid is really at risk in many parts of the world. And in the US, it's estimated that assets, infrastructure are as old from 25 years to almost 100 years old. So solving intermittency, using energy storage, so that when the sun goes down, the wind stops blowing, or the grid fails, that people have access to power, and building in, again, that security, removing intermittency, and then also this idea of introducing a greater percentage into the energy portfolio, leveraging renewables all over the world.
Fantastic. There's so many different directions I could go with this conversation, and I'd love to just be able to pick your brain ad nauseum. But you had mentioned just the statistic in terms of the number of people that are not connected to the grid, and I think it's something about like 13% of the global population. A vast majority of that is in sub-Saharan Africa. And with a population that is very young, I think there's a lot of concerns about what you need to do to create economic activity, and it certainly starts with electricity. Is that, in terms of your international kind of outreach or expansion, where is Africa part of that? Where are you guys looking to expand your footprint at this point?
Yes, currently as a company, we've deployed systems in over 40 countries, and many of those are throughout the continent of Africa. And yes, former UN Secretary General made the point that the golden thread to economic opportunity, social equity, and environmental responsibility starts with access to power, renewable power specifically. And we have seen as a company, when we introduce systems, however large or small, microgrids and remote villages, that the economic development that becomes possible because of these types of deployments. And so for over 10 years, we've been building strong partnerships with other manufacturing companies, NGOs, and really focused on creating that economic opportunity in these territories. But we also are very focused on working with utilities. And as much as there is utility failure, we look at the utility and that infrastructure as an asset that needs to be optimized and can very much be optimized with energy storage. But as a company too, we are not looking at utility scale storage farms, and certainly those are important along with large wind farms and solar farms. But when you think about security again and resilience, if you have large storage farms, those are dependent on the same transmission and distribution lines that are failing. And so to really create security and optimize infrastructure when it is available, it takes distributed customer-sided assets. And even working with utilities, with software providers that can aggregate distributed systems so they can be aggregated as a fleet, meet utility requirements, but when the utility has to shut down or it's an unplanned outage, these assets are deaggregated and customer-sited assets create that resilience and security. So we continue to work on grid all over the world, but also off-grid. And we look at any type of generation asset or infrastructure as an opportunity to optimize, create security, introduce renewables, and certainly create economic savings around those types of deployments.
No, fantastic. Wanted to go over and talk a little bit about what you mentioned in terms of transmission grids. Certainly in the United States, you have just a grid system that is old. I was reading somewhere that it has historically taken about 25 years around the world to kind of build out hub and spoke. And in many respects, some of the things that I've certainly been reading is that you can kind of leapfrog what you've done with hub and spoke over to smart grid in the same kind of way that you've done with telephony from landlines into cell phones. When you kind of take a look at Latin America, where do you see some of the challenges? What do you see as some of the opportunity sets that are exciting for you?
Well, we do have systems throughout Latin America, and the numbers throughout Latin America, there's a high percentage of people that are connected to the grid. But just like other parts of the world, people are facing either planned or unplanned power outages. And then, of course, with climate change and some of the catastrophic incidents, whether it's fires, drought combined with heat, which is what we face in California, or hurricanes and storms, this idea of treating the infrastructure that is there, it is not obsolete. And this kind of either or approach to either it's top-down centralized transmission and distribution, or it's distributed, it's an and, it's a false choice. And so as a company, we're always looking to partner with power companies and utility companies to help them optimize those assets. I would imagine, I think you said 25 years, I would imagine just like California, this is true all over the world, that a lot of the infrastructure goes back further than 25 years. And to give you a concrete example, in Paradise, California, the town that burned within hours just last year, that fire was caused by a transmission line that was almost 100 years old, 7.5 miles above the town. And the transmission line came in contact with the tower. But the point is, we're in a different century, but we're still using 19th century technology. And the technology exists, and we are making a difference in parts of the world. I think what is really needed is the political will and also the financial, the economic modeling that demonstrates there is a strong ROI for these projects, whether it's large scale or small scale. And I'll give you another example, a field clinic, a pop-up clinic that we did for a refugee camp. By bringing in a microgrid, a very small system on a trailer to power up a 20-bed ICU pop-up clinic, that clinic, they were able to save over $2,000 a month in average fuel costs to feed generators. So that precious money was able to be directed toward medical services and supplies. In addition to that, COVID-19, a respiratory infection, they were able to offset about 20,000 pounds of CO2 emissions month over month for that pop-up clinic, just by bringing in a solar plus battery microgrid on a trailer and hooking it up and powering up this clinic. That's a small example. And we work in larger commercial systems too. The economics are there, even without adding in what are seen as externalities, the cost to human health and environment, the cost of oil spills and other horrific accidents that happen along the entire supply chain and fossil fuels. Add those economics in and the ROI becomes even stronger. But even without the externalities, there is a strong ROI. And the last point I'll make about that in terms of our company, we have been intent on proving this out. We are a revenue-based company. We have not grown through VC funding. So we've had to fund our own R&D and growth based on the efficacy of our technology, but also the economics and the types of systems that we build all over the world that do make an impact. And that pop-up clinic is just one example. But I think the economics behind renewables plus storage, the distributed positioning of those assets, the energy security it creates. If you think about power outages on the tail of COVID shutdowns, the economic impact of a power outage is even more catastrophic. So I think policy and a true look at the economics and building out these economic models to help demonstrate how this does pencil out.
That's fantastic. I think that what's clear is that all of the above is something that needs to happen. The financial component is one that is absolutely relevant. Let me just wrap up with a real quick kind of teaser on the technical side and ask you, so is lithium where it's at? Is that where we're going to be for the next decade, 2 decades? Are you guys doing some R&D on other fronts?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I was just interviewed and asked by a reporter who wrote an article saying that lithium iron phosphate will eclipse all other lithium chemistries within 10 years. I predicted it would be sooner. But your question goes to the heart of a different matter, and that is innovation in our industry is happening daily. And as a company that controls its manufacturing and processes and choice of materials, we're always looking at the innovations going on in energy storage, and we are chemistry agnostic, and we will continually look at what the other developments are. I'm not at liberty to say right now what we are testing, but yes, there are many different types of chemistries and approaches to energy storage that we are looking at.
That's perfect. No, we're going to have to leave it there. This has been wonderful, and it's clear that it's just going to add to the panel that we have coming up next Wednesday. So by all means, I would first of all like to thank Catherine, like to thank SimpliPhi for their support of the Major Energy Conference 2020. And I would finally just wrap up by saying, please head over to the www.iamericas.org and register if you haven't done so. As I said, we've got a heck of a lineup, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much, Catherine. Really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I look forward to the panel as well. It'll be fun.
Okay. All the best. Thanks. Bye-bye.